All right, what is going on, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Black Desert. So today I wanted to update one of my older guides, my crystals, artifacts, and lightstone setup, because I do actually change it up every now and then. So this is going to be version 7, I believe. And so I want to show you guys what it's like for both beginner all the way to end game, and I'll give you guys some recommendations on like alternatives if you're not looking to spend billions on crystals as well. So with that said, start off with everything. So this is going to be for both PvE, PvP, and I guess a little bit of life skill, but I mean, life skill is pretty self-explanatory with crystals. You have XP or mastery, and I'll explain all that as well. So with that said, these are what I actually use, and I'll tell you the situations and scenarios as well. So this is my go-to PvE. When in doubt, like let's say for most grind spots, this is going to be fine. And things that don't require additional like mechanics like knockdown, stun, and all that stuff. But we'll talk about that later. So this is the go-to general. You'll be fine with most things. And the reason why is we just kind of want to go for as much damage as we can and ignoring like any CCs or anything. So first of all, we have 4 ultimate Macalods. I remember back in the day, Macalod used to not be as useful before the ultimates came out, and there were people that would use it, of course, but ever since Land of the Morning Light gave the ultimate crystals, the 4-piece is actually very solid, so I think it is worth using. Followed by 2 rebellious crystals. We had an event recently where people can exchange for those rebellious crystals or like the awakenings and other stuff. I believe that's over at this point, but these are very strong simply because it just gives overall good PvE stats like HP, AP, and monster damage. So these are definitely 2 that are worth getting. It is very expensive. These are like 2 billion each, and I think they're for the most part sold out on NA, but if you put an order on, I think you'll get it fairly easily. It's just you can't buy them infinitely. So next thing we have is 2 glorious Akrod crystals. These are basic general PvE crystals because it gives 7 monster AP, attack, and cast speed, which is always nice. Corrupted magic crystals because it's more damage. And after that, we have brutal decimation simply because more AP and back attack damage. If your class does back attack damage a lot, which you should be doing, every class should be doing, it's very good. And then these 3 next ones are kind of flex spots because, or I guess 4 of them, these are kind of flex spots as well. So you can change it out with any resistance crystals if you feel like you need it, or just more AP if it's you're just going for damage. So I have 2 Valor crystals right here because it's crit hit, which I mean, it's important to have, but I feel like you max out on crit hit by just doing other things and having like other gear on and food in general. So you're mostly going to want the 5 AP for this one. If you are on a budget, this is the crystal that I would get as an alternative, though I don't know if it's significantly cheaper, but it's like an alternative. So this is 400 mil, right? The one you can get. If you grind Kagdums, you can also get the thing and just make it yourself. The alternative would be the Ancient Magic Crystal of Crimson Flame, because this just gives the 5 AP, and then it doesn't have the +2 crit hit. So if you're maxed out and you don't need the crit hit stat, you can save like 100 mil for one of these, and you can use as many as you want because it just gives AP. So that's good. And then, of course, same thing here. RBF Crystal of Power. You mostly just want the 5 AP, but if you're, if you fight a human type enemy or, you're PvPing, I guess someone duels for spot and whatnot, get that +3. Will it matter? Minimally. And of course, the Gearins tier. I understand this is a very rare and expensive crystal. So if you don't have one of these, just add another, like, one of those Red Fang, or not a Red Fang, but like those power crystals that give +5 AP. You can have an infinite amount of those if you want. But I would try to recommend most endgame players to get a Gearins, because 5 bill could be an upgrade to a newer player. So it's hard to recommend it, but it is like a very strong crystal just because it's like overall PvE, and it gives a lot of stats. Plus the 10% item drop rate, very valuable. So yes, it is worth it. Would I recommend it for a new player? It depends where you're at in the game. If 5 bill is not an upgrade for you, then yes. All right, so next we have PvE for the speed, which is mostly going for like as fast as you can. So I use this mostly for the boss splits, you know, like the Land of the Morning Light weekly bosses. Sometimes this is kind of special. If you're going for time pushes, this is what it would be for. But I also switch this one around a little bit. So the standard PvE damage crystals, what we have different is we have Olukas. And the idea of this is more attack cast speed, which, you know, if you're score pushing, it's a little bit weird if you know what you're looking for. And like, if you know the mechanics for each boss, it's good to just clear faster. But so is more damage is also a good thing too. So we have back attack damage here and more AP. So the difference between this one is this one, you're more of a glass cannon. You do damage, but here we're stacking back attacks. So the back attack damage would be really solid as well. And then this one, you know, it really just depends. You could swap this out for another damage crystal, in my opinion. But, you know, not getting one shot by certain things and being able to survive some attacks might be helpful. So that's what's different. We do, like, this one you take more damage, like the damage reduction -2. You don't have that, but you have more back attack damage instead. So I think, like, in very specific scenarios, this one is slightly better, but at back attacks only. And then if you want that, so this is a little bit different. I don't use it for most things. It's really just morning light time pushes, which even then I don't really care about too much. All right, so this is the back attack with accuracy. I use this specifically at like some Ulukita areas, grind spots, high end. So we have the usual, but the difference is we have extra accuracy crystals right here. So that's like another 60 accuracy, more back attack. So this one gives accuracy, whereas this one over here, the corrupted crystals, they do not give accuracy. And admittedly, this one's a little bit old, but if there's spots that require a lot of accuracy, it is important. So back in the day when I grinded Tungrad Ruins, that place required a little bit more accuracy, along with Crypt of Resting Thoughts. They used to require a lot more. Nowadays, it's less relevant. But in case you want PvE with accuracy and, you know, more back attack damage, that one is very solid. And yeah, if you don't need it, like, this one is a very specific use one. Otherwise, just go back to this one, the PvE damage. This one's self-explanatory. If you are either grinding a spot that you won't like risk dying, or if you are AFK on a training dummy overnight, straight XP. Gearance is slightly better than, you know, your standard 20%. You get these crystals by playing on seasonals, like, you know how they just give the season pass rewards. You don't even pay for anything. You just play a season. They just kind of give it to you. So over time, you just have a lot of these, and then this one over here gives 75% combat and skill. So you might as well, if you have one, you might as well put it on. So this one is where you have 0 risk of death, or you are AFK on a training dummy. Because when you're on a dummy, guess what? Doesn't matter. Your damage. So straight XP, AFK use only. Next we have life skill XP. This one is still a work in progress, but essentially this one is going to be all like life XP, and this is for gathering in particular for me, because I value XP for gathering. And you guys see right here, like, I'm Guru 28 gathering and stuff. So sometimes, I guess it depends what you're going for, because both XP and mastery have their uses, because every time you level in, like, I believe, what is it? Guru or something? Or is it master? You get permanent mastery +5. So getting it to a certain point is probably good, like leveling it up. And my idea for gathering would be, you kind of want the max energy ×2 crystals, simply because having a higher energy pool is always nice. And then I want XP. So the alternative would be straight up mastery crystals, which, you know, you just stack mastery and then it should put you up 3 brackets. So life skill mastery goes up by 50 every time for every new like bracket level. So in theory, you would want to have both XP and mastery, simply because they do different things. But like overall, if you're not gathering, I think mastery is just in general better. But like if you're gathering, what you would really want is max energy plus 20, and then ultimately it doesn't matter what else you have. I would recommend making this as close to 3 brackets as possible, so at least 150, assuming you're starting at 0. So whatever pushes you up into the next 50 or like 100 number, get as many of that, and then put in XP if you would wanted to. So let's go into PvP right now. This is what I use for straight up glass cannon, full damage, and then it kind of like, I don't see this one used as much, but if you just want to see how much damage you can do, ignoring a lot of other things like evasion and everything, this is what I have. So of course you want to use these Alucas crystals because they give human damage, and this is the priority stat that we're looking for, is human damage and accuracy. So we want to have 2 Vipers, big accuracy, 2 Elkars, more accuracy, glass cannon, big damage, and then special attack evasion is very good. So for a new player, there are alternatives for these special evasion crystals. You can get the like one with basically 0 health, and then one up to 100. So let me show you like one of these crystals. Let's see. So here are the entry level all the way to end game. This is the one you would use if you're like a new player. The reason why is ideally you just want special attack evasion 10%. That is the highest priority stat. Going all the way up to Jin, which gives 100 HP, and then the ones in between the 30, 50. So like at end game, obviously you want like the most stats as possible while still keeping this one. I think nowadays most people should be able to just get the Jin one very easily, because best in slot for that one. And then so going back into here, what priority crystals we have here are the RBF Viper, which gives 10 human damage times 2. And then Red Spirit Crystal, more stats like AP and human damage times 2. And then here is the Karme RBF ones, which is human damage time plus 8 times 2. So this is where a lot of your extra human damage comes in, like as you guys can see here, plus all this stuff. So yeah, it's kind of like strictly PvP. And then even then, I don't think this is the best one at all. It's just kind of like, hey, how much human damage can I stack? And then turns out people run evasion, so like half the time it doesn't even matter. So next one, for all of you who play defensive builds but want to still like, you know, do a little bit of damage in PvE, or not PvE, PvP, here's what we have. We have 4 ultimate Hooms, because this is a very tanky 4-piece set, and I think this is also solid for newer players who just want to try out new grind spots and don't, you know, want to put 4 Macalods and then potentially lose it. So I think it's just a safer crystal setup. So 4 Hooms, and then the usual here. What we have as defensive crystals, on the other hand, are 2 crystals of Frozen Bitterness, which is basically evasion, DR, and monster damage reduction. The monster damage reduction is irrelevant here, but the other 2 stats are nice. And then we still want to have accuracy because this is PvP. And then the highlight crystal would be the Hate's, basically the purple crystal. And then it's straight up just all defensive stats, which is really nice. And then here we have Adamantine, which is a resistance crystal for knockdown, bound, and like everything else. You can swap this one out for any resistance crystal that you think might be mandatory or that you think you need the most, but I think that knockdown is probably one of the most devastating CCs. So this one is important in my eyes. But if you want to have 2 of them, what I would swap out is probably like, if this is defensive only, you could take out an Oluga's Crystal because this is more an offensive thing. So if you feel like you need more resistances, then I would take out damage for that. But just keep in mind, this build, like, it's defensive. It's not going to be doing a lot of damage. So that's what you want to have. And this one is the accuracy build. I think this one is the most common that most people will use because it gives a nice balance of damage and being able to actually hit evasion players as well, more or less. So I think if you were to run into anyone, this is the standard go-to that most people will be using because it's just a nice balance. So offensive crystals for PvP. You're going to have your accuracy as well, very standard, and your special evasion, standard. This gives more offensive as well. And then we talked about the human damage that we saw before. So it's like a nice mix. And what do I have here? I have 2 adamantines because I don't want to get knocked down. Generally, you know how, if you've done any sort of PvP in this game, you know how there's a 2cc limit, right? You can test this in the battle arena and then try it on the dummies. And that gives you that little countdown of like, it's weird how CCs work in this game because it doesn't exactly work as like knockdown or float counts as 1cc. It's like some of them are worth more in a way, like knockdowns versus a stiffen and all that stuff. It's really hard to explain it. It's just one of those things where you just kind of learn over time. Either way, knockdown, most devastating CC. You don't really want to get that. But aside from that, this one is what I think that most people will be using in general. Obviously, it's not like very specifically built. I think this is just a general use one. All right, so next we have our PvE defensive. Admittedly, I don't use this one as much because, well, I'm in a different, like, I have more gear than most people. But this is what I would use if I was trying a new spot and I wasn't sure if I would be able to survive. It's kind of like a test thingy. So like if you just got a new upgrade for AP or something and you want to grind a new spot, but you don't know if it's safe or not, I would just put the defensives a little bit here. And then, you know, this is just more offensive, but with a little bit of bulk as well. I think you could probably swap out the Olugas with like these extra 5 AP ones nowadays, because this one is a little bit of an old one that I don't use as often. But I think this is a good balance of being able to still do damage, but also making sure you don't die. Like, this is what you would use for your first, like, hour to just see if it's safe or not. And then you go back to your standard PvE damage one. All right, so let's go into the specialized build. This one is more for PvE. However, this basically copies the PvE template, but instead of that, we replaced it with 2 adamantines. And the reason why is we have knockdown, you know. Sometimes when you grind high-end spots, the monsters will, like, when you group everything up, and then if you get CC'd, it's over. So you want to make sure to have a knockdown resistance as well. So I can't really give you like where this is useful because it's like I don't use all of them at the same time. But I think what I used this one for was Ash Forest and then maybe another one, but I don't remember. Either way, if you're in a spot where you get knocked down, just swap to 2 crystals and then that problem gets solved. But then it goes by your standard PvE damage with crystals. All right, next we have evasion. I wish you can reorder all of these crystals because I would separate them by PvE and PvP, but I don't really want to reset like all my crystals just to move the order down. So I wish you could just drag and drop it and then it would have been a little bit cleaner. But anyway, this is my evasion setup. This is kind of like an endgame thing because 1, this is PvP, and 2, if you are an evasion build, this is a little bit different than your standard DR build. So yeah, evasion PvP. This one is a little bit tricky to talk about because there are like a lot of things you can swap out. But of course, for PvP and evasion, you kind of want the extra defensives. And what I wanted. Basically, this is stacking evasion for the most part and defensives. You don't really have too much offensive ability here, but if your goal is to just not die, this is also very solid. And it's a little bit different from the PvP defensive over here, because this one adds a lot of accuracy, whereas this one adds a little bit of evasion as well. So the difference would be the Harpia crystals here, best in slot evasions, and then you still have everything else over here. So that's about it. You want to have more evasion, and you're doing fine. Knockback crystals, kind of like the knockdown, but this one is knockback. Same concept of like crystal setup. Knockback, I believe if you are trying out, I use Dekia Thornwood, and you know, anything that knockback is, I think the new Dekia Pilaku. I haven't tested the sulfur yet, but the places I would use this, Thornwood, or Dekia Thornwood, I should say, and Dekia Pilaku. Same concept, but the difference is you want to have the fighting spirit crystals, whereas this one is adamantines. Same concept. Anti-stun, which is, once again, same thing. The crystals you would change are for 2 giant crystals for stun stiffness. I think this one is used at Crypt of Resting Thoughts. Very specific area, and you want to make sure to, you know, not get it. Well, I think either one, like, I actually think I got that backwards, like knockback and stun. But either way, these are all very high-end areas to the point where you could swap in and out these crystals very easily. So you want to have one just for like very specific spots. I know you could just replace it and not use the entire preset, but I'm lazy and I just rather press 1 button instead of like 5. So this one's the anti-stun, which is giant crystals. And then we talked about our mastery crystals earlier and life skilling. And then this one's the PvE accuracy. I don't think this one is actually any different, but it's just standard PvE damage with some accuracy. I think this one is just more of a test one. So you know what I'm gonna do? For all of you out here who are beginners, let me show you some crystals that I would use. All right, welcome back. So I had a phone call, so I had to take that one. So it's on edit, that's why. Where were we? So I was going to make a crystal setup for beginners and tell you how I would do things. So first of all, ignore this one. This one is the costume that you have in your, like, you know, like this one over here. If you put a costume socket in, you can put that over there. So if you don't have it, you don't have it. It's not a big deal. I'm going to ignore some of these because 2 extra slots on top are for your Garmoth's heart and everything. So if you don't have 2 of them extra, that's fine. I'll ignore those spots for you. So first of all, what you're going to want to do in at least 4 of the slots is try to have at least 4 Whoms of some sort, whether you have the ultimates or not. Just keep in mind these are beginners crystals. So what I would do is add some, where are these? Whom crystals over here. So even if you don't have the ultimate Macalods, which is fine, you can still use the Han Whoms, which is a very affordable one until you get your upgrade. And so you can just buy 4 of these over here. These are very cheap. And also, I mean, like, you still get the set effect, right? So I know this is going to look a little bit different. God, I hate how you have to do that over and over again. So hold on. So over here, let's just say, pretend these are the regular ones, right? Hold up. Oh God. So yeah, pretend these are the Hans and not the ultimates, right? So you have 4 of those as a beginner. Next thing I would recommend is probably getting one of these or the power crystals, right? So essentially what we talked about before, if you just want the AP and not the crit, you would have 2 regular ones because these are 300 mil instead of 400. And then after that, for very cheap alternative crystals, these are good, but these are more on the end game side of things because it's just kind of expensive. But one thing I would recommend is getting corrupt magic crystals. These are what, like 30 to 50 mil each. So definitely recommend, or I guess they're 100 now, but either way, still a very cheap crystal. 100 mil is basically nothing these days. And then after that, I guess if you're in a lower end area, you don't really need resistance crystals. But other things you guys can do is this red one. I don't really know how I feel about the red one, the red crystal, because it gives a lot of stats that are combined for, like, it's not exclusively PvE or PvP, but it is decent for overall grinding stats. So if you wanted like a decent one that gives just a bunch of everything, and this is for new players and you can't afford a gear in or you just don't have one, I would recommend one of these. And for your 2 upper crystal slots, I guess like the real answer is, do you need more accuracy? Put some accuracy crystals in. These are 5 mil each. If you don't need accuracy, you would fill your slots with this one, the one we showed you before, and I'll show you why. You would get so if you look at the Valor crystals, it says you can only use 2 in a group. But if you look at the ancient power crystals, there's no group and no limit. So basically you just fill up your crystal slots with as many of these power crystals as you can, because it just gives +5 AP. And yeah, if you don't need any sort of unique resistances and or, you know, any special defenses, then just add as many of these crystals as you can and you'll be fine. So with that said, do I think any of these like Alucas or like knockdown, grapple, resist, and whatever are worth it? I think they're more for PvP. I don't think they're bad at all, but they're just kind of unique. And for all of you thinking about getting the Mysterious Darkness crystals, I don't think these are bad at all. It's just, for most people who are lazy grinders, getting back attacks is like something you kind of have to like watch out for. Whereas if you just get the corrupt crystals, you just do big damage and then you don't have to worry about it. It's slightly, I don't know, it's probably comparable, but it's just you don't have to be as alert. So yeah, overall, that's my crystals. Now I wanted to go over my artifacts and lightstones as a real quick rundown, just so all of you guys can figure out what to do. So this is what I use. This is an endgame thing. I use all-out attack for most things. The downside of this one is it requires 2 strike crystals. Even to this day, it's pretty hard to get for endgame players. You kind of have to spend a lot more than you normally would on it. Or kind of just have to get lucky getting it. So this is very difficult to get. But it is considered best in slot for most things. And then for everyone else, depending on where you grind, there's a set called the Wild. And basically what it does is it gives you extra damage to like Commosylvians or Demi-humans. So depending on where you grind, you would obviously pick different ones. Next I have straight up PvE or combat XP for PvE. And you know how we had a crystal set up for like AFK training dummies? You get another 400%. I do recommend this for seasonal characters as well. If your goal is to get to level 60 or 61 just to power through seasons, this is a very solid one. It's 0 threat, and most places you won't have any worry about dying. So I think this one's awesome. Next, we have the Untouchable set. This is more of a defensive or evasion one. This is a little mix. I guess it's a hybrid, whereas most other people would just straight stack DR or evasion. I think this is a decent one. Do I use this one often? Not really, but I do notice a difference when I have this on versus more damage. So even for Dark Knight, who is basically glass cannon, I do notice a difference with this one. It's pretty nice, but I don't use it as much. It's just one of those experimental things that I use in very specific scenarios, but I do think it's a good one. I think the most expensive Lightstone for this one is the Disrupt one, and even then, I don't even think it's that bad. Let's look it up. 300 mil. Yeah, I think that's the most expensive part of this one. So either way, you're doing fine. Let me just make sure. I want to check it. Yep. the 300 is the most expensive. For life skillers out there, gathering. This is actually the best in slot for gathering, and as far as I know. The yawning hedgehog item drop rate, or for gathering item drop rate, that's very good. Then you get mastery, gathering XP, and energy recovery. Very important stats, all of them. So this one is kind of expensive. The forest crystal, I think that's like 2 billion. Fortune crystals like 1 billion, and iridescence like 500. So yeah, this one is an investment, but it is like the best in slot in my opinion. So if you are willing to invest in it, I think it's a very solid one. Let's actually look up those prices. So the ones you're going to want are forest, fortune, and iridescent. Forest. Oh god, there's so many. It's only 1 billion. I mean, it's still 1 billion versus 2. Fortune. So right now we have a total of like 1.7 bill. Did I spell irid? God, I'm dumb. I don't know how to spell iridescent apparently. Where are the Lightstones? Okay, this one over here. So yeah, it is like a little over 2 billion to invest in this Lightstone combo, but I do think it is actually worth it. The cooking and alchemy, these are just straight basic like XP ones just to level it up, and then same with processing. Nothing important here. For beginners and entry level players who don't have strike crystals, I do believe that death blow is a solid option. Instead of the magic accuracy, you just use an extra AP against monsters. I used it for specific things, but I do think the extra AP against monsters and critical hit rate is also decent, especially for people at Olin's. I heard that was still very good. It kind of fell off a little bit from the past year because all out attack is more common, and same with the wilds of like species damage. But I do think this is actually a very solid entry level and very specific end game spot one. And then our final one is for PvE, or not PvE, PvP, human and accuracy. So basically this one just gives straight up human damage of another 24, so 12 from the effect plus the crystals. The blight crystals are kind of, I don't actually know, they probably went down in price. So yeah, this one is about like 1 bill per crystal times 3 plus the iridescent, which is another like 500 plus. So like it's about a 4 bill investment into that, which is, it's not something that like most people want to invest in a PvP setup. So here's what I would use as a beginner. So let me show you. If you are starting out and you don't know how to invest in artifacts and lightstones, here's what I would do. You probably have these extra AP against monsters. These are very common to find, and I think you actually get one as a quest reward. So you would use these 6 extra AP against monsters, and you use 2 of these. Easy 12 AP. And when it comes to Lightstones, you would just add in 4 extra AP against monsters, so that's another 12, plus the artifacts. So that's basically adding 24 AP against monsters, straight up, very low investment. These are like 5 mil. You can buy these off the market, and I think that's a very good entry level. For all of you defensive players out there, what I would recommend in terms of artifacts is probably all damage reduction, because chances are if you are an entry level and you're looking into this, you shouldn't be evasion early on, just because if you can't build it at high levels, just go DR. So 2 all damage reductions, or I guess like max HP. I wouldn't really recommend these max HPs anymore. And I know these Kabua artifacts are best in slot right now for PvP, or not PvP, PvE, but they are also 10 bill each, so I can't recommend that for early players. So all damage reduction for defensive, and then here's what Lightstones I would recommend. I guess depending on what you're doing, so probably stacking all damage reduction and or damage from monsters if you want. Admittedly, these are expensive and these are the cheap ones, so just when in doubt, all damage reduction, max that out and you'll be fine. And for all of you PvPers out there, an entry level set would be, I would actually, like, keep in mind, this one I have magic accuracy artifacts, because PvP artifacts, you would use probably more accuracy because that's kind of the harder thing to get. So what I would recommend, depending on what class you're playing, obviously you use either magic, melee, or ranged accuracy. How do you know what you are? I thought this was self-explanatory, but just in case it is not, you go to your stat sheet and then you see your combat type. If you're a Dark Knight, you're magic. If you're a warrior, you're melee. And if you're an archer, you're ranged. And if it's not self-explanatory, just look over here and you're good to go. So what I would do is have 2 accuracies, and then for like the damage, you would probably just put like more AP or like whatever you think you need. If you think you need more accuracy, just add more accuracy stones. These are very cheap. If you want more damage, just add more AP. And like realistically, PvP is a tricky one to talk about just because there's so many different combinations of things you think you might need. So like it depends on where you're at in the game, and that's what will determine what you use. So PvP is a tricky one to talk about. When in doubt, just add more damage and accuracy. So with that said, that's all I wanted to talk about today. All my crystals and Lightstones artifact setup. Hopefully you guys learned something. Obviously there are different combinations for more specialized things, but I think this was just a good general overall setup for most things, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it. So once again, thanks so much for watching. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Would love to see you come back. Drop a quick like as well. And yeah, I've been playing this game for 8 years since this game came out in beta, and I didn't have all these guides to help me. So whether you're a returning player, new player, or just someone who's looking to get better, hopefully you guys enjoy these videos. And I do upload pretty regularly, so if you are interested in catching new information and various other things to help you improve, hopefully this channel helps you, and I will see you guys next time. Have a fantastic day. Peace!